You know, sometimes we experience the broken things of life, and we live in a broken world, and so broken things happen, and we're resilient people, so we pick up the broken pieces and we glue them back together, and things may not look the same, but we do the very best we can, especially in the Christian community. When we glue things back together, we say, well, light can shine through those cracks in my vessel, and that is all true. But what happens when your life gets broken so much that it's actually shattered, and you look around at your life and there's nothing but dust? You can't glue dust back together. However, I've discovered through the shattered seasons of my life that dust is actually the very ingredient that God loves to use. Dust is what he formed man out of in Genesis and breathed into the nostrils, and then life inside the human body happened because God knows exactly what to do with dust. And Jesus, right after in John, right after he says, I am the light of the world, he picks up some dust and he spits into it and he rubs it on the blind man's eyes, and now he can see. In Jeremiah chapter 18, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord, verse 1. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message. So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hand, so the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as it seemed best to him. Then the word of the Lord came to me. He said, can I not do with you, Israel, as this potter does, declares the Lord? Like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand. Dust is the very ingredient that God loves to use, to take what has been shattered in the midst of our broken world and form something amazing out of dust, to form something amazing out of us. When I was a little girl, my life was shattered when my dad walked away from our family, abandoning us and leaving my mom to care for me and my sisters. And when my dad abandoned us physically, he left us financially, and my mom could no longer care for both me and my sister. And so we were sent to live with some relatives, and I always wondered how different life would have been had my dad not walked away. It was a shattered place of my life. It was dust. But then all those years later, many years later, my little girls and I had gotten married and had 3 biological little girls, and we went to a concert one night. And honestly, when we went to this concert, I did it because my daughter's brownie troupe was studying the country of Liberia, and so I said, this will be great. We'll go on a field trip, and we'll go hear the Liberian boys a cappella choir. So I felt like it would make me like one of those moms, you know, who actually had their stuff together. And so I said to my little girls, before we go, let's really make this an amazing event. So I pulled out the map of the world, and I said, now let's look for Liberia. Since it ends in Ia, Mommy knows that it's in South America, so let's find it. And we looked and looked and looked, and my oldest daughter, who's much smarter than me, she was 9 at the time, she said, Mom, I'm pretty sure Liberia is on the west coast of Africa. And I said, I know, I was just making sure you were paying attention. So we went to this concert, and These 12 beautiful boys from the other side of the world got up and started to sing from the depth of their soul about the joy of the Lord. And then the coordinator of the event got up and started to share the story that these boys were from the war-torn country of Liberia. And that while they had been touring in America, rebels had attacked their orphanage, and many of those that they knew and loved from their orphanage had been killed. And so they were in a very precarious position, but they wanted to complete their tour to raise money to send the money back to Liberia to help feed the orphans back home. But they didn't really know exactly what would happen with these 12 boys. And right then and there, God spoke to my heart and said, Lysa, 2 of those boys are yours. And that was very complicated. So I started looking around the church, pointing out to God all of those other moms who did this right. Like I said, see God over there, like she bathes her kids every day. And they all have matching bows. And when she reads to them, she doesn't skip pages. So I love, God, how you were able to send this message to me, but through me. And really, it's going to bounce from me to her because she's so much more qualified. But you see, God wasn't looking for the perfect family who had it all together. God was just looking for someone to say yes. And so at the end of the choir concert, I got up and I went up to the coordinator and I said, not that I'm interested at all, but if someone were interested in like helping some of the boys, how could we get more information? And the coordinator said, well, if you're supposed to get involved in the lives of any of these boys, God will make it so clear to you. Just go over there and meet the boys. So I took my 3 little girls' hands and we started making our way over to where the boys were. And 2 of the boys separated from the crowd, made their way up to me, wrapped their arms around me and called me mom. That was kind of clear, you know. But then I had such a situation because I had to get in my car and call my husband on the cell phone. And I'm all like, hey, do we need milk? And by the way, there's 2 teenage boys from Africa now calling me mom. He replied, where are you? And get home now. But then in the coming weeks and the coming months, God moved in my husband's heart in such a profound way. And we were terrified. This is not the plan that I would stand up and say, hey, if you want to do this adoption thing right, do it our way. We had 3 little girls, ages 9, 8, and 4, and I was completely overwhelmed with them. And then we meet these 2 boys, and they were 12 and 13 when we met them, and I was going to displace the birth order, and it was scary and frightening, and I was running a ministry called Proverbs 31, and then we had the boys tested. And I thought, well, at least we'll get some really wise counselors involved, and they'll help us, bind everybody together in a healthy way and mesh as a family. But at least every day I can send them all to school, and I will gather my sanity, and it will be just fine. But when the boys' academic tests came back, they needed to be in kindergarten. And there were no kindergarten classes that would take boys their ages. And so we were left with no choice but to wait for it. Homeschool. Now again, there are parents that do this amazing. I'm just not one of them. And so it was very complicated, and it was too difficult to homeschool my boys and send my 3 girls to school, so we brought them all home. And then I showed up at the sticky farm table one day, and I had 5 people looking at me expecting an education. And I'm thinking, God, how is this going to work? I was just praying I don't hurt anybody today. I remember one day we were doing the flashcards, and I'm sorry if you invented those, but flashcards are of the devil. They just are. And so I put them all in the van, and we drove around, and I said, look at the speed limit signs, add the numbers up. That's math, people. That's all I got. And so it was complicated, but I showed up at that sticky farm table every single day. And I just said, God, I'm bringing the little bit I have. And if you will just meet me here and you take what I offer in the natural and you bring the super, somehow maybe this thing can become supernatural, and it's all in your hands. After several years, 2 years of homeschooling, we had the boys tested again, and by a miracle of God, they could get into middle school. And it was just astounding. And you better believe when that yellow school bus pulled up to my house, I looked at those 5 kids and said, shimmy, shimmy. And I did the MC Hammer dance around the kitchen. It was miraculous. And then they progressed on through school, and there were lots of hard days and some good days. But by the time Jackson graduated, our oldest, he had a 2.79 grade point average, which is amazing when you get through school in like 7.5 years. He was graduating high school at 21, and we were just so thankful for that 2.79 grade point average. But he didn't get into the college he wanted to get into. And then right before graduation, we get invited to the High Award Honors Ceremony. And at this High Award Honors Ceremony, at the very end of the ceremony, the principal stood up and gave Jackson the highest award of the entire high school based on not his grades, but his character. And it was tremendous. So I copied the award and I sent it with this transcript and just gave it one more shot. And he got into this amazing college, and we were so excited. I remember when I dropped him off at college, and I just thought, this is such a pinnacle of this whole adoption experience. We dropped him off. I prayed over him. Remember who you are. And I hugged him and I kissed him and I drove out of that parking lot, and he did remember who he was for 3 whole weeks. And then he met some new friends and drove off campus and smoked something that rhymes with hot, and he got caught, and he lost his scholarships, and he was kicked out of that college. And it just seemed like, how could this be the story now? It was shattered. I couldn't believe it. I went to bed and I started to do what so many of us do that help kids, whether we're mothers or whether we're running an organization that helps kids or whether we're helping facilitate helping kids in the foster care system. I do what so many of us do. I started to draw a line from my child's mistake to some sort of weakness that I must have had in mothering. And I started beating myself up. And then God revealed to me, that's the wrong line to draw. Because you see, God knew that I was going to be Jackson's mom one day. And God knew the struggles that Jackson would go through. And God knew that we would both bring into this equation a sense of shatteredness. But God loves to take the dust of shattered situations and breathe life back into it. God loves to use the ingredient of dust. And so God showed me the right line to draw is from my child's weakness to a strength that God saw inside of me. God said, what mama will bend without breaking? What mama will pray not just about this child, but pray him all the way through? What mama will stand in the midst of her son's heartbreaking choices and look straight at the devil and say, you messed with the wrong gal this time? What mama will do that? And you see, God breathed a new strength in me that I was able to look at my beautiful son with all of his ups and downs and shattered places and great character, and at the same time, sinful choices. And I was able to say, you've made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. You are my son. And I'm so happy to say that God took the dust of that situation and formed something brand new. And my son was able to eventually apply back to that same school. And he graduated with a degree in business. And just last October, he got married. And I have a couple of pictures that I'll end with because I want to show you. This is Jackson. And he married someone that looks just like me. Isn't that so funny? I know. And then I also have to show you my son Mark and his wife Teresa, who is also from Liberia, and the two greatest gifts that have ever been formed on this earth. My two grandbabies, Selena and Susan, and there we all are. God loves to take the dust of our shattered places and do something miraculous with it. And if you've got dust in your life, welcome to the family.